Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's show. We're going to be looking into two cases that actually have some similarities in them and to reveal how such investigations can go. You know what? Somebody does something right, somebody does something wrong. So we're going to start off with the Lisk investigation. And basically, he's got a big court appointment this Tuesday, March 17th, and he's got the Omnibus. With us today, we're going to have both Josh Ritter. He'll be with us in a few minutes. He's just finishing up his show on Courtroom Confidential. And we have Josh Zeman, filmmaker, Killing Season, Propsy, you name it. So we got a whole bunch of things going to happen today. So as we're waiting for Josh Ritter to come on, so we're going to have Josh, and Joe. So it might be a
Oh
little
my
confusing
God.
today. But you know what? We're going to break this stuff all down for everybody. We're going to get into the thing. So I want to welcome all the Courtroom Confidential fans that are now pouring into the room. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you guys can join us. And we're just waiting on Josh, but Josh Zeman and I are going to get just started touching on some of the things. So, Josh, this Tuesday, you're going to actually be in the courtroom.
Yeah, I'll go down there. Should be interesting. We'll see what's going to happen. I based upon the nature of the response to the omnibus that came down, you had written on the top of your page, checkmate. I thought that was a good summation of how Judge Maisie is going to respond to Michael Brown's plethora of commentary. It's not going to be good, I don't think. Heuermann.
Basically, he wants to throw out the entire case. So, which we know is not going to happen for 7 victims and that kind of thing. So it's not going to get to that kind of situation in any stretch of the imagination. But now, last time you were there in the courtroom, they brought him in through the back, or they walk him through the corridor? Or
no, they never walk him through the corridor. He always comes through the back. It was interesting. Like the first time I ever saw him, he was huge, huge. Now, being in jail for so long, he's not eating as much, so he's starting to shrink and shrink more and shrink more. So I wonder what he's going to be like. I wonder whether Michael Brown is what they're whispering about. I wonder if there's plea deal discussions going on in the background, and that's going to affect the nature of what we're going to see. I've been continue to hear chatter. Some people are saying that the chatter is more significant than it was previously, but there's been so many rumors and predictions in this case. It's hard to do that, but I wonder if that's going to be clouding some of the discussions. One of the big things I think is whether or not any of Michael Brown's points get through. Does he have a win on any of these points, whether it's Sandra Castilla or the search warrants? If he doesn't win on any of these, then
it's going to be a very long day. Yeah, he's going to have a very long time with it. So we're going to get into that, especially when So when Josh comes on, I want to start off with that. I think that's a great point that you make here. Just want to thank Bev, 16 months as a member, and we have a new member. Eroy 94, thank you very much. Just a reminder that after today's show at 3:30 p.m., we're going to have a members only show. So I hope all the members can carry over, take a quick break in between this show and next show, and we're going to get into question and answer. We can do anything you want. We can go over cases, and I have a little thing planned for it. But whatever you guys want to talk about, I'll be fully up for it. So Crazy Mary Joe just checked in. The Courtroom Confidential crew is here. Thank you very much. Yep, we're waiting on Josh, and Josh should be here any minute now. So I just want to welcome all the new people. We're in the chat. Nightbot will be sharing Courtroom Confidential's information, Josh's information, as well as myself. So you guys can just take a look at that. So yes, you got something?
Well, Josh? I was going to say, if people want to follow along, remember that the omnibus and the people's response to the omnibus is in Patreon, our Patreon, so they could just log into the Patreon, pull down the documents that we're going to be looking at.
Right. So I just want to before we got Josh Ritter just joined us, but looking forward to the collab. Thanks, Joe, Josh, and Josh. So we're gonna have a tough time today. Josh, welcome.
It's good to see you. Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. It's been a while since we spoke, right? It's been almost a year or so. So this is.
I know.
That's great. So we had the Courtroom Confidential crew. Is it fully represented here? So thank you very much. So Josh and I were just kind of priming the audience, Josh. I don't know how much of a chance you got to read the original Omnibus that Michael Brown had put out, that 180-page document, and then the document that the prosecution put out on top of that. So basically, it's like reading a novel, right?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I have not had a chance to go through it thoroughly at all.
Okay, good. So we're gonna break down some of the things with you, but we want to get pretty much just like the legal perspective.
Yeah,
on
sure.
on some of these arguments that we have. Josh, you were talking before, and you had asked a question about wins. Like, so he basically he put up 7 points, and basically he's fighting the DNA, the hair follicles, the cell phone data. I mean, you name it. The entire case against Rick Heuermann it was under scrutiny on this. Josh Ritter, do you think that he has a chance to win on any argument on any of these things? I mean, we know about the DNA, we know about the cell phone records, we know about all these different aspects in here, but can you see a win?
No, I think the closest argument that they had from a legal perspective for a win was, and I don't know if this is even technically considered part of the omnibus, but when they were making that argument about, there's different, every jurisdiction has a different standard when it comes to what is quote unquote new science. And in New York, they have a standard that if there's not a precedent for that type of evidence having been admitted before, then it has to go under a certain type of scrutiny. And they have to show whether or not that's science. And this was dealing with I think it was the use of the mitochondrial DNA, because they're dealing with hair follicles that are rootless hairs. So you're dealing with a different type of DNA that just simply hadn't been used in a criminal context in New York before. So their challenge was, hey, this is, brand new science. We all know it's not brand new science. It's been used across the country, and it's widely accepted from the scientific community. But they were making the argument that in New York, that is not the case, and therefore this judge should not accept it as something. And then that was a huge domino to fall, right? If they don't have the hair follicle, then they don't have the DNA, then how are they going to match? Much of their case is relying upon this scientific evidence. Now, I think the judge made the right call, because otherwise we'd all be still stuck in the Stone Age with criminal law if we didn't allow for new advancements in science. And he did point to other jurisdictions in the US that do accept this type of, breakthrough technology. But that's kind of my long-winded way of saying that if there was one argument that I thought had some legs to it, it was that one. But even that one wasn't all that strong.
Right. Yeah. So we know that everything, this thing kind of got passed through, but there's still this whole motion that when you read this omnibus, I mean, it was just like this hair just magically through, but they kind of failed to tell everybody that it's just not one hair on the victim of Sandra Castilla. I mean, there were 3 hairs, one belonging to Rex, right? One belonging to his wife, to his ex-wife. How do you make that disappear? So let's just say, put yourself in that position, Josh. You're the lawyer. I mean, how do you try to make that disappear?
At the end of the day, they don't have a great case here. I mean, as a defense attorney, there's a part of me that empathizes with defense attorneys who are caught in really bad situations. And this is a case where you've got you've got a mountain of evidence. It's not even the DNA. The DNA is fantastic, and the DNA, which is what ties everything together. But putting aside the DNA, they've got other evidence. They've got, the kind of cell phone and email evidence that they're able to track him and the activities that he was up to. They've even got downright, eyewitness evidence when it comes to IDing one of the victims that he had been to before. His own vehicle is in fact how they start to break this entire case. And then you've got, when they were able to pull that blueprint from the grave recesses of his hard drive, that had been discarded, that was just not only nightmarish, but just tremendous evidence too of his involvement in all of these crimes. So it's not just the DNA. And it's like, what do you do as a defense attorney? Somebody's got to stand up there and advocate on this guy's behalf. And so I think more than anything, when we see these situations, I don't even think they think they're going to win. I don't think they thought these were winning arguments. They just thought, I've got to preserve these issues, because if I don't, there's not going to be anything to appeal down the line. And they're going to be looking back at me as having dropped the ball. So I'm at least going to do my job and bring up every imaginable issue, even if I think it's a loser or not. I think that's honestly the situation they find themselves in.
Tough situation. Tough to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Tiffany there in Courtroom Confidential, thank you for gifting those memberships, Tiff. Thank you very much. But thank you, Josh, too. So, I mean, yeah, he has a long road to hoe, so to speak, in regards to this, just to say the least. But you know what? Listen, I've been saying all along that Michael Brown has actually put himself in a really unique spot where he's becoming this expert on the mitochondrial DNA and stuff like that. He's going to be sought after guy, I mean, after this, because he has to learn so much about it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he's I mean, I don't know him, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but yeah, he's taking advantage of the situation. He's making sure that he's giving plenty of press conferences and getting his name out there and doing a respectable job. And you're right. He maybe the next time there's a DNA case that comes along, his name will be bandied about amongst others as being a good attorney for this type of stuff. But yeah, I can't imagine them having roundtables back at his firm where they're really talking about their chances of winning on this thing. I think they're just mainly trying to make sure that they don't step in it, as it were.
And what about a plea? Like, where would that come in within this conversation of, oh my God, there's mountains of evidence, circumstantial, DNA, etc. Everything I throw against the wall is not going to stick. There's a lot of Hail Marys that are going to get dropped. At what point in this whole process do you start to entertain?
So it's so funny. I just came from my live stream before this to join you guys, and somebody had asked that exact question, like what regarding Rex Heuermann, is there a chance that he might accept a plea? I think it's absolutely zero, and here's why. What is the prosecution gonna offer him? What are they gonna offer him? He's in New York, so there's no death penalty on the table.
Right.
Brian Kohberger had the death penalty. Brian Kohberger was looking at a potential of actually seeing the death penalty. And in Idaho, they intend to do it. And they're not taking forever to do it out there either. So there is a very real possibility he could be looking at the death penalty in Idaho. And he said, if you remove that, I will plead. What is the state of New York going to offer this man? He's looking at 7 consecutive life sentences. They're not going to step off of that. What are they going to? They're not going to offer him something that gives this monster the opportunity to see the outside of a prison. So what has he got to lose, right? There's nothing that they can negotiate with him that he feels like, unless it comes down to he simply doesn't want to be bothered by the trial, that he doesn't want to be dragged through the mud. He doesn't want to hear all these people testify about horrible things that he's done. But even then, the prosecution's got to offer it to him, right? Like like they've got to, well, I mean, I guess he could go to the judge and say, Your Honor, I want to plead to everything and I don't want to involve the prosecution. And the judge could say, okay, fine. You can plead to everything and we're going to max you out on it. And you're going to get 7 years, 7 consecutive life sentences. That's a possibility, but from a strategic point of view, I think he's like, let it ride, like, what do I got to lose? Maybe the prosecution drops the ball. Maybe the people can't understand this mitochondrial DNA stuff, and maybe there's a chance. But to me, this is going to trial for sure.
Can you argue? Can you get better conditions? Can you horse trade for that?
No, because that's usually up to the Department of Corrections. And you're a lifer. You're going to go where other lifers go. He'll probably go in some sort of administrative segregation just because of the crimes that he committed. So he'll probably have that life ahead of him anyways. But I can't even imagine there's been discussions. I mean, it's like, what are you going to talk about here? There's nothing to discuss.
So no Anthrax Island, Clarice.
No Anthrax Island with view and walks along the beach. No, none of that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I have my stance has been pretty similar to that. And I always tell people, like the death penalty or not, but from the law enforcement perspective or the prosecution perspective, it's a tool that you could use to get people to talk or get people to
Yeah.
plea.
Yeah.
And you're losing it. And to me, I think more importantly, that tool would have been much better to be used to get him to talk about other unrelated crimes that we might not even be aware of.
Yeah.
And
So then,
yeah, that's a great point. People don't realize how often death penalty cases are settled for that exact reason. And they do get people to admit to other stuff. And they do get people to, and just simply not putting the victims and the victims' families through a horrible ordeal of a trial too. The prosecution sometimes wants to avoid that. So yeah, it is, you do see a lot of death penalty cases get settled because they're trying to avoid the death penalty.
what, as a defense attorney, what are you looking for? Let's say that the prosecution is going to do a great job because they've already, the evidence suggests, or their, predictive behavior suggests that they've done a great job. What do you hope for in terms of like the Hail Mary problem, like some kind of juror doing something incorrect? You're looking for that mistrial. What should you hope for?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, acts of God type stuff. Some juror messes the whole thing up. I mean, from kind of like the along the lines of the more realistic, I think maybe you're hoping for confusion. You're hoping for people not quite understanding. But the problem is the chances of that dramatically reduce with each added victim, right? Maybe one of these cases is not as strong as the others. And I feel like one of them is kind of an outlier, that it's not as strong as the others. I can't remember now, but say that again.
Sandra Castilla.
Yeah, I feel like hers is maybe not as tightly tied up as the other one. So, okay, maybe you shoot for a win on that one. But even if you get that win, it's a Pyrrhic victory, because you're now still looking at 6 years of life without parole. And jurors are these things are going to cross corroborate each other, right? They're going to go, hey, am I really honestly going to have problems with the idea that the guy who committed 6 murders, and I believe it's rock solid, and I'm a little questionable about the 7th, or am I just going to go ahead and toss that one in because it's like, this guy's obviously a serial killer that we're dealing with here? So from the defense perspective, maybe they take away what they can call a win by a case like Sandra Castilla if they're hung on that or something. But I honestly, I think if they're having realistic conversations amongst each other, it's just about, how do we not mess this up? How do we just make sure we do our job properly?
Josh, he has these 7 victims that are attached to him in this case, and we know that the judge Tim Mazie said, "Come hell or high water, this thing's starting in Labor Day." How does the prosecution set this up? Does he go with the Gilgo 4 first and then add on the other cases? I mean, how does that work? Is that have to be planned out? I mean, you just can't say, okay, listen, this guy is sitting over there, killed these 7 women, I rest my case, right? I mean, you have 7 cases that have to be, I guess, kind of broken down. Each one, I would start with the Gilgo 4, because we know. Yeah. I mean, how would that even run?
That's a really interesting question. Well, one, with best laid plans, it usually doesn't end up that way, right? A lot of it has to do with, when do you have availability of witnesses? In this case, though, I feel like they're going to deal with less of that as a problem, because so much of it is going to be about investigative work and DNA work, where those witnesses are probably available to them whenever. They're not going to have to worry about a bunch of eyewitnesses and when do they bring these people in, because it's not really that type of a case. But I wonder what they feel might be more, because I think then it comes a question of what makes it easier for the jurors to wrap their heads around. So you could see where they might say, well, let's do this purely chronological, from who disappeared first is how we're going to do this. We believe their disappear date is likely their murder date, and their discovery of their body date is not as important, or even the identification of their body date is not as important. It's really, when did these women disappear? Or maybe an easier way to understand it is kind of how the investigation played out chronologically. So, like you said, the discovery
of they want to talk about that.
Well, yeah, yeah, good point. But from the idea of Joe's point of like, okay, we discovered these bodies in Gilgo, that led to this, which then led to this, which here's how it all played out for us as an investigation. I don't know. I don't know if there's a strategic advantage to either way, but they've got to do, you've got a lot of stuff here. You've got to make it easy to comprehend for jurors, because you don't want them getting confused. A confused jury is a hung jury.
Right. I have a question. What happens, and I think you probably understand in this case, because of this guy, Rex Heuermann, I mean, he tortured these ladies. It's so horrible, and these feel so bad for these victims. And I fear that they have pictures and or video that could be so shocking, yet at the same time really put the theoretical nail in the coffin. Do you go there?
That's a great question.
Do you go there?
That's a great question. Here, so you talked about what are the pitfalls for the prosecution. This is one of them, is getting a little overly zealous. The prosecution's got a rock solid case here. What they don't want to do is an unforced error of bringing in prejudicial evidence beyond its probative value. So to your point, let's say that video does exist or pictures do exist and they are horrific and nightmarish. Those obviously have probative value. Those are obviously evidence of a crime, but are they can an argument be made that they are going to so inflame a jury that a jury will be impassioned just from the shock value of it alone to convict this person and not really based upon the evidence? That's an issue, and that's an appealable issue. And that's an issue that for sure the defense is going to bring up. If they try to bring in those pictures, they're going to say, Your Honor, this was way more prejudicial than it is probative, and we object. And the judge could say, well, I'm going to go ahead and allow it in. And now you've got an issue for appeal. And that's what the prosecution, this is the thing, the prosecution, as good as this
too much.
Yeah, it's too inflammatory. I've had cases where the evidence, we've had incredible pictures that are, when I say incredible, incredibly graphic pictures that we didn't bring in because they were helpful, but they weren't so helpful that we wanted to risk the prejudicial value that could be argued about them. Prosecutors have to do that and think about that all the time. Sometimes you don't want to get every single win because now you're setting yourself up for more problems down the line, especially if you have a strong case. I mean, one of the things the prosecution has to be worried about in this is, like I said, unforced errors. You don't want to be piling on in your attempts to really nail this case, and you end up stepping in it and creating appellable issues down the road.
Yeah, it's like the old kill the ball carrier when we were kids, right? You just keep on piling on with stuff, and you might not have to go down that route. That's actually pretty interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, neither. I wonder what are the big appealable issues with regards to this case? Like, what do you see are so appealable?
Well, everything in that omnibus is going to be something that they're going to try to raise on appeal. I mean, the issue with appeal is you appeal every possible thing you can imagine. And it's what does the appellate court actually take up, right? So everything in that omnibus motion, even if it gets denied across the board, they're going to bring it up on appeal. But I could see the issues about the mitochondrial DNA. I could see that being a question that the appellate court in New York is going to have to answer because it is kind of groundbreaking. They're going to have to weigh in because they have to create precedent. So they're going to have to weigh in and say, yes, we agree with the trial court that though this was new scientific evidence to the state of New York, it does qualify for the standards of acceptable evidence and accepted in the scientific community. And there's where the precedent is created then, the new case law. So that's going to become an issue. Nothing else is really like, nothing else about this is really, maybe, they're probably going to try to make some sort of argument, and I think they've already made it, about privacy, regarding the pizza box and whether or not he had privacy interests in that. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous argument, but they'll make it, you know.
Sure.
Nothing. I mean, where we're going to have a better idea of that is when the trial really starts to happen, because then that's where the issues come up in the fog of war and what might, you know, where there might be questions.
Hold that thought, Josh. But we have a question from Amy Bella. Says, how rare do you see a hung jury? Are they rare hung juries, or kind of? We saw a couple recently, right?
I don't know the statistics on it. I feel that they are rarer than verdicts, right? I mean, I feel like you get more guilties and not guilties than hung juries, but they're not so rare that they're not a concern. I mean, because the problem is you just need one juror. One juror goes, I don't get it. I don't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. You know, one juror goes, I just have a feeling he's a good family man. And why would a good family man who's a real estate banker or whatever the heck he was, an architect, commit these crimes? It just doesn't make sense to me. You know, I mean, a lot of these times when you have a hung jury, it's because you've already lost the case in jury selection. You've already messed up. You allowed some crazy person to get onto that jury, and they were just never going to change their mind. I think the chances of that, again, are incredibly low here because, one, there's not a big contingency out there who likes serial killers. So you're not worried about like jury nullification, right? And then two, when you've got 7 murders, the likelihood of people getting a hang up it becomes increasingly low. You know what I mean? Exponentially lower with each murder that you've added to this.
So, you know, it's interesting, Joe, because I also am looking at the Eitan Pates case, and the Eitan Pates case is going into its 3rd trial now in New York City, but the first trial was a hung jury. There was one juror who didn't believe that the guy did it. And then weirdly enough, the second conviction did get thrown out on state appeal. So it does happen. But I wonder, where Joe and I have been talking about one juror, is the fact that they're trying to bring up alternative suspects. The fact that there's this Andrew Dykes guy.
Yeah.
So could it be maybe Rex did it, but maybe he didn't do it alone? I don't believe it was just him, that being the one hung juror.
So if a juror doesn't understand how do I convict a person when I think somebody else might be involved, that could be a problem. That could also be an appealable issue too, right? If the judge doesn't allow for some of these alternative third-party culprits, doesn't allow that evidence to come in, they could argue later on, you know, they're going to make their record. We have other suspects. Judge is going to say, I'm not going to allow it. And they could say this was improper to not allow this to be presented to the jury. And now that I'm thinking of it, they're also probably going to they've already made a motion to sever the trials, that they want them handled separately rather than all together. That will become an appealable issue because to my point, they'll say, no one's going to acquit a guy when you put up 7 murders. Whereas if we were able to consider these individually, they each have individual problems. And even though the jury should consider them each individually, that's an important point. He's charged with 7 individual crimes, right? It's not like there's not like a serial killer charge. It's 7 individual murders.
Serial killer.
Right. So there is an argument to be made that, hey, they are unfairly influencing each other by adding all of these together. So they're going to make, even though this isn't the first time that argument's being made, that's another thing that they will try to bring up on appeal.
Which kind of brings me up to the question I was going to ask in regards to this, Josh. So we had this Andrew Dykes guy who was arrested for, then the victims were known as Peaches and Baby Doe.
Right.
So Tanya Jackson and Tatiana Jackson, everybody in their world thought that those cases were going to be tied to Rex eventually. And
right.
Nassau's case to me is a little weak, right? I mean, you have former husband or wife, or not husband and wife, but boyfriend and girlfriend. He was married when he had this kid. How does the defense pull this into it and say, listen, everyone thought that my guy was responsible for this, and they weren't. Same thing with these other cases, like Sandra Castilla, because everybody was, including then District Attorney Tom Spata, we're blaming John Bittrolff for Sandra Costella's murder. Like, how does that all play into the defense? Because it's going to make things a little messy.
Yeah, and they're trying to make it messy. And has the judge ruled on? I know the judge ruled on. You just mentioned his name, but the one that they thought at
John
one
Bittrolff?
point. Yeah, the judge has already ruled on that issue, right?
Yeah, his defense brought up they wanted to have his DNA tested for Rex, or they didn't really mention his name, but we're assuming it's
Right.
Rex in regards to DNA found at the location because there was more than one DNA sample found, and they said it's not him. So that's
Yeah. I mean, the defense is going to either one, they're gonna ask the judge to have it admitted and allow them to argue these things from a perspective of a myopic police investigation, that in their rush to judgment, they ignored these other viable suspects. And that's not really a third-party culprit argument. That's more of a rush to judgment argument. And they're allowed to make that argument. And it will be up to the judge whether or not he's going to allow them to bring in these alternative suspects under that theory. I don't think he will. But that there again will create an appealable issue. And it's a place too where the prosecution is going to have to be careful because they don't want to open the door. You could easily open the door in your questioning of detectives when it comes to, you don't want to say things like, and no one else could have done this in your view or something. When you start doing this kind of stuff, then the defense goes, well, wait a minute. Weren't there other people who were killing in that same area? Wasn't that a dumping ground for other killers? Don't you, in fact, have convict? So they're going to have to be very careful with some of this questioning that they don't open the door to that. But yeah, it's an issue in the sense that it does appear that area was a complete dumping ground for other people, and that they're just finding, you can't walk 100 yards without tripping over a dead body on Gilgo Beach. And why are they coming after this guy? And the prosecution says, well, we've got DNA and everything else to link him to these bodies. But I think that's why, too, I was appreciative of how the prosecution was very careful in who they added. Like, they waited till they had solid results before they started adding. Remember, they started off with, I think, 4, then they added 2 more, then 1 more. Like, they've been very deliberate and careful to not overextend themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. They started off with the Gilgo 4. They started off with 3. Then they added the 4th.
Right.
And then they went through the whole thing. But what you said before, Josh, was basically sum and substance about what 2 district attorneys, right? The 2 top law enforcement agents, one from Suffolk and one from Nassau, that Gilgo was a dumping ground. I mean, I always said if I had hair and I was the DA, I'd pull it out, because this is not the kind of stuff you want to hear from a fellow district attorney when you're investigating like New York State's biggest serial killer case in decades.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting too to see if the defense can get in some of the shenanigans, some of the missteps of the prosecution and investigators before all of this, how they're going to try to argue to get that in.
I had on my list Burke and Spata. I mean
downright corruption. I mean, you've got a guy who.
No, you're right. Outright corruption. Yeah. That's going to have to be heavily litigated too, because from the current prosecution, you could say, there's zero relevance to this, right? Well, there's relevance from our perspective, but from the juror's question of, did he commit these crimes? Does it matter that you had all of this other malfeasance taking place? Not really when you're talking about, unless you want to say, well, that extended to them planting evidence or something like that. But
or can you say that extended to them not looking at other likely suspects?
Or that argument, that's going to be a big issue, right? For the defense is going to be, this was like I said, a blinders on, myopic, zeroing in on our guy, even in spite of other evidence out there. I think that's fairly reasonably handled by the prosecution with the evidence that they have, but they're going to have to, because it was unsolved for some time, right? That there were, it is likely that there's other people out there.
Yep. before we get into the next question, we are vultures. Thank you very much. No butter for Rex's bread, right? We know that was one of the things he was complaining about, not getting butter in his jail. And Lulu loves Radiohead. Thank you very much for this. How lucky are we to have the holy trinity of true crime YouTube? Yeah, so it's the Triple J show: Josh Zeman, Ritter, and me. Show. I'm the outlier on this one. So, but yes, now in the latest uh, form that the prosecutor put out, he refers to these mementos, right, which some people would call trophies for the serial killers. How significant do you think this plays into it, Josh? And what do I mean is he had a People magazine article on his in a plastic bag on his desk. He had in a safe in his basement where some of these crimes allegedly happened. And he also had articles of newspapers in his bedroom, like everywhere he lays his head, basically, he's had that. How does that play into this case? I mean, is this one of those outlier things where they just mentioned it up front and they're not really going to bring it up in the trial? Or do you think this is significant?
I think it's significant. I think the prosecution will bring it up. I think the idea of, here's a person that we can link to these crimes through other means that are far more tangible and strong. But at the same time, in case you had any question in your mind, jurors, he's also obsessed with this case, which is a little bizarre, and he's following it. And then they'll probably call some sort of FBI profiler to talk about that, to talk about how serial killers become high on their own supply and they love following their own press and they love the people far more interested in their own crimes and the coverage of that than most people are. That'll be interesting.
And that's
how that plays out.
Well, and you know what though, you kind of hit another thing on the head too, because he was found a copy of Mindhunter book, and that's one of the things that John Douglas talks about is they keep track of these cases in the media. So it's kind of like it's going to play well for the prosecution, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they have a sickening fascination with other serial killers too.
Well, just learning. That we spoke to Mark Safrick, and he was like, his fascination was he wanted to learn to be better so that he wouldn't get caught. So he followed Ed Kemper. So he looked at Joe Rifkin. Hey, Joe, you were talking about Dave Schaller.
Yeah.
What was your point about Dave Schaller?
Well, Dave Schaller, if you remember, Josh Zeman spoke to him on the Killing Season, and he met Rex Heuermann. He got into a fight with Rex Heuermann. He gave the description of his vehicle and that he's the Ogre. He's the guy that gave out the Ogre. Now, Dave Schaller's got some personal issues on his side. But my thing is, I'm not a lawyer, of course, but one of my things that I thought that, tell me if you think this is a viable option. Putting him on the stand in the very beginning, calling him as your first witness, saying, because one of the Gilgo 4, right, is involved, right? The first 4 cases that they charged them with, and you have an eyewitness on that. Is that a plan, do you think, to do that? Or would you save that for like kind of your best for last kind of thing?
That's a good point.
I think the most important witnesses that you put the most thought into are your first and your last, right? You want to start off strong and you want to end strong. And I don't know if this guy's all that strong, if what you're saying about kind of his background is true. We also don't know how enthusiastic he is about cooperating with all of this. I mean, I don't think we've heard anything about him, but sometimes these people, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on him, but it sounds like he was living a bit of a fringe kind of criminal lifestyle, right? Maybe he doesn't want to come to court and talk about all of this. Maybe he said something to police a long time ago and doesn't really want to be bothered by all of this, but he's important in the sense of how they crack the case. So I probably, if I were making the call on it, I would probably hide him in between some stronger witnesses somewhere along the way, even though he's kind of important to the story. I don't know if I want witness number 1 to be a person that might be a little bit of a wild card.
Or in this respect, because they got this description and then sat on the description for 10 years this was the thing that was hidden, the one police file that was hidden in all the other files that then they went back to and refound. So maybe it just opens up too much trouble to start with that, or you save that one for the end.
That's a question I have for you guys, because that's an interesting thing. You look at it and you go, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way you were describing it makes it sound like how this investigation was being mishandled, that they had this information, they sat on it, they didn't do with it. I kind of look at it like, isn't it incredible that some detective got a burr up his butt and said, I'm going to take a look at these old reports. And has anybody looked into this? And anybody looked into that car? And anybody actually done some research on who owned those cars? And like, to me, that was some incredible, just, you know, kick in the bushes type of police work. But maybe I'm viewing it more romantically than the jurors might view it, you know? I don't know. Do you? How do you think that'll play?
Well, my problem with this part is Dave didn't testify, but he stated publicly that the cops showed up at his house and they basically showed him a photo array of the vehicles. And he said that he picked out the vehicle and the cops were like, oh, now if I'm the defense attorney and I'm not at but Josh, you tell me from the legal standpoint, you would want to see that. You have to keep that. It's evidence, that photo array, right? And usually you have the person sign it to make it official and the time stamp and the date. If they didn't do that, do you think that becomes an issue?
Did they not do that?
We don't know. Listen,
that's
we're talking about 10 or 12 years ago. So the possibility, because he said that they got in their car and drove away after that.
No, it's that goofy kind of stuff that's a problem. Like if they made a little mistake, and listen, we all know that it's not that big of an issue. Like as far as like they were able to then track down the vehicle and find him, like, but it does show a carelessness and sloppiness in the investigation. And if the defense can create a common theme of that, of kind of bumbling, missteps, not following protocols, not keeping evidence, and continue to hammer that as a theme throughout the trial, that could definitely be a problem.
They can. I believe that they totally can. I mean, this guy said, oh, there's this ogre. He's 6'3". Joe and I have gone over this numerous times of how easy it would have been to go find a Chevy Avalanche back then, look at some licenses, and
not a common car.
Yeah. Nor a description of a gentleman who's 6'3", Frankenstein ogre monster of a man who drove that car.
And they knew that was their suspect, right? That the ogre was likely their suspect.
This becomes the problem of the case, where it should have been plain and clear to see that this would have been the guy to target. And supposedly they run a lawman database search, can't find the vehicle, and for some reason drop this clue, this unbelievable clue, for 10 years, and it doesn't get found again until they decide to digitize the files.
Right.
So remind me if I'm remembering this correctly. There's a report that the ogre shows up. They pull a scam on him, right? Don't they? They pull a switcheroo and steal his money. And he contacts her through a burner saying that wasn't cool and sets up another date, right? That guy, and the police know that guy set up the next date and she was never seen from again after going on that date.
In some respects, it's not exact to that, but they get a description of a guy who went and saw her just previously, 6'3". They got in a fight, and Dave says, if you're going to look at anybody, look at that guy who drove this Chevy Avalanche or drove this car and was huge and got in this fight. And that is the clue that they don't.
And that's the hottest clue they've had.
Oh my God.
And they sit on it, like they get to one little dead end and then just sit on it. That's bad. That's really bad.
Yeah, really bad. Shy Gal, thank you for gifting that membership. So before we transfer into the Guthrie case with the time we have left, we're closing in on 1,000 viewers here. We have Josh Ritter of Courtroom Confidential and Josh Zeman of Sinister with Josh Zeman, both from YouTube. And do you guys have any other final thoughts on the Rex Heuermann case before we go into it?
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's unfortunate that New York has a no cameras in the courtroom thing, don't they? I think that's an absolute tragedy, but I'm looking forward to it.
Why do you think that that's a tragedy? I'm interested.
Because we live in one of the things that not to get on my soapbox here. One of the things that distinguishes the American system of criminal justice is that we open up the doors to the public. And in these modern times, opening the doors includes the media. And so I think allowing cameras in the courtroom should be the rule rather than the exception.
Interesting. Do you not believe that everybody ends up, quote, acting in some respects or another? Or
I think they do, but I don't think that is enough of a problem to not allow them. But yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the way judges and everybody all of a sudden change, but I don't think it's enough to actually take that away from the public, especially in the case of this kind of public interest.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, too bad. I would like to have seen the step by step in this case that we're going to have to rely on some of our friends, including Josh is going, and then Laura Ingle from News Nation, she'll be there. So we're going to rely on some of our friends.
You planning on being in court every day?
We'll see. We'll see.
I'm going to try to go too. Try to go too. So we hit the 1,000
live coverage from
person mark. Thank you. So we did hit the 1,000 viewer mark. So let's segue right into the Guthrie case now. Josh Ritter, have you ever seen a case like this develop? I mean, holy cow. And I got problems with some of the police work in this thing too. I think comes back and haunt them, including not holding the entire property from a crime scene perspective. Is there any explanation, do you think, from a prosecutor's point of view, like not holding the house and the property as a crime scene?
No, they dropped the ball. They messed up big time. Their explanation was that they had processed this scene. And not only is that horseshit, sorry for my language, but
that's okay.
They obviously didn't, because they kept on coming back out to the scene. There's no reason, like, they release properties when it's somebody's life is on hold, right? Like if the entire Guthrie family was living there and they couldn't go about their daily life and all of their clothing and belongings, sure, you could understand, let's get this done so they can move on. She's the only woman who was living there. There's nobody that needs to get inside that house. So even from just a public perception, you would think, let's keep it on lockdown for a week or two. I think initially there was this idea that maybe she walked away, and that apparently was now immediately apparent that was not true. And they've still not explained to us what the condition was like inside of the home that led them to believe that. But I do know that there's blood on the front steps. So if that's not a clue of foul play, I don't know what is. But why they kind of were hesitant to call this a crime scene initially, it took them a day or two before they actually started to characterize it that way. And I don't know if that kind of played into why they released the scene so quickly. Even as I'm talking about it, that doesn't even really make sense. It doesn't make sense.
So then why do it? Like, I understand, like, it was a mistake, but what do you think their thinking was? Or was it just lack of thinking? I mean, but it can't be that bad.
I don't think they realized. I think they're overwhelmed. They're in over their heads. And I don't think they realized what this was going to turn into as far as from a public perspective. Now, that doesn't mean, even if it wasn't a public case, they shouldn't have handled it that way. But
sorry, the newscaster of today, like, how can you not from the
and TMZ add that into the mix?
I mean, it's one of many missteps that they've had in this whole thing, and a lot of them are from the kind of PR perspective. But I mean, you remember the kind of media tour that the Sheriff Nanos went on immediately. There wasn't a camera he wouldn't talk to initially. And then they do these press conferences, and then people start to really question a lot of the stuff that he was saying and talking about. And he starts changing what he's saying and backing off and clarifying comments that he had made earlier. And then he shuts it down completely.
Yeah,
the press conferences, it's all been handled very poorly.
And I don't know as much as you guys about that, but I just learned he had a reality show previously called Desert Justice. Is that real?
Yeah.
So either he should be savvy or just ridiculous, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The message I've been telling everybody about these chiefs and police executives that are out there: use your public information officers at the beginning of these cases, because it changes so much. You look like a fool when you have to walk yourself back like 2 days later.
Yeah. It's funny too, because when he first started giving press conferences, I actually thought, oh, he seems very earnest. Like, he seems like he really wants to solve this. He really wants to find her or find who took her. And then you started to realize this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and he can't shut up. And it sounds like he's got this kind of political ambition underplaying all of this. It's really, really not been good.
KLB, thank you for donating that membership. Very appreciative. Sheila Duffy's got a question for you, Josh Ritter. What was the atmosphere out there in Pima County? Because you were out there with Fox News, correct, where you have your show?
Yeah. Well, initially it was tense in that, you know, everybody thought we were trying to save her, right? I mean, you know, you remember in the first week or so, we thought this was a kidnapping. There were ransom notes. We thought there was a very real chance of recovering this woman alive. So there was a tenseness and anxiety and urgency to the whole thing. Then things went quiet. Then we got the videotape. Then that kind of heated things all up. When that surveillance came out, it was just remarkable. And if you remember, they made an apprehension of someone, I think in that same 24-hour period that they ended up letting that person go. But I mean, there was this real kind of enthusiasm. And then by the time I was out there for 2 weeks, but it had already been going on for about a week by the time I made it out there. So by the time the third week was ending and I had left, it was really starting to feel dire. And it was like, wait a minute. The chances of her being alive are really dropping. They don't appear to have any good, solid leads here. This is starting to turn into a situation that who knows how long this could take. And I would say now the feeling is just depressing. Like people are starting to have conversations of will this ever be solved?
When, as somebody who is familiar with the media, when you heard TMZ, because I wasn't around that time, what did you think? What was the internal conversations between everybody from, like, because you guys are all media, looking at other media and being like, tell me about that.
It was kind of like a collective eye roll, like, oh God, of course TMZ is going to somehow interject themselves into this whole thing. And then it was immediately like, well, why is a kidnapper sending messages to TMZ, right? It just doesn't play into any of this. Kidnappings happen, by the way. Like the Sarge can talk to this, I'm sure. Kidnappings happen. My experience with them is that they're of people of high net worth. You know, if you got an actual kidnapping for ransom, a person of high net worth, but that does not have a high profile. Right? You kidnap the son or daughter of an executive of a company that you may have heard of the company, but never heard of the person because you don't want the media attention. Whereas this is somebody sending information to TMZ where you're of course going to get media attention. And then I think the perception of TMZ really started to sour because it started to look a little exploitive. Because then they were like coming out and having a press conference with every letter that they received. And then it was like, now it's not the kidnapper. Now it's somebody who knows who the kidnapper is and they want money. And it just started to become a distraction and a joke.
Yeah. And a lot of people thought about, like, why didn't law enforcement shut them down? I mean, this is all kind of protected under the First Amendment. You would hope that they would hold back, right, some of this stuff because it kind of made things even more chaotic than they needed to be. And like I said, I've had cases where, thank God I didn't have to deal with the situations that some of the police departments have to handle today, between the social media, between the, people tramping around your crime scene. And I blame the sheriff for not controlling that, not blocking off the streets, keeping it only open to people who live on the streets. I mean, it was very simple. All you needed was 2 cars and you block off that whole street. And I've yet to see a real coordinated search, like a line search where the cops are, a line, they walk in the whole property. I've yet to see this. Remember they were poking in the septic tank with that's not a search. God forbid they find her in there, months later.
Yeah, I forgot about the septic tank. I mean, they did have this huge, whether you want to call it a grid search or not, but they did have that one day when all of the agents were kind of canvassing the area. And that's when they started finding all the black gloves. Remember, they found like 16 black gloves or something like that. It seems like it's just been littered with black gloves in that area. So I think they have the problem.
Guys.
The problem, and this doesn't get talked about enough, is the geography of that area is so incredible. where she lives, first of all, it's kind of on the outskirts of Tucson. It's not like in the city proper. It's like a suburb. And her neighborhood is very off the grid, kind of rural. Like there's no sidewalks. It's like it's paved streets, but there's not a right angle in the entire area. Like if you don't know where you're going, you could easily get lost. And like across the street is the desert, right? Tucson's one of those cities where, you know, on one side of the street, you've got a strip mall and a Walmart. And on the other side of the street, it's just desert for miles. And so if you really were trying to hide a person or hide a body, you don't have to go all that far till you're the middle of nowhere and nobody's going to find that person for a very long time.
Like Albuquerque.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, like, you know, some of the, you know, the reporters, and I don't know if you heard them, Josh, because you were there, the coyotes at night, you can hear them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you leave somebody out in the desert, if the heat's not going to get you, the coyotes are going to get you. I mean, if she is in fact gone and they left her out in the desert, whatever, recovering her body becomes even slimmer by the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you might never find her at all, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, that's what you're really dealing with. Then you're dealing with still a situation where who did it, and if you do find somebody, now you have a no body case, which you know, not impossible, but it kind of makes things more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Defense attorney's dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, think about this. Like you mentioned the 16 pairs of gloves or the 16 gloves not holding the crime scene. You have reporters taking pictures and showing videos of the blood on the front steps. I mean, this plays right into the defense attorney's case, boy. They're going to be like, look, how do we even trust any of this stuff? It's almost reminiscent of what we saw in Kohberger, right? What they were doing with their giving stuff back during the middle of it, shutting it down, bringing in a cleaning crew. I mean, it's like, guys, this is 2026. We know a lot more than this. I don't care if you have one homicide a year. There's certain ways to do this, and we have national standards on some of these things. The NIJ has put them out. You know, I don't understand why we still have the same problem.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Kohberger because I remember that that department in Moscow was really getting it from the media. Like people were really critical, and I remember they were having press conferences. Those press conferences weren't ideal. People were very critical of are they up to the task? Have they brought in the FBI? And then we find out after the fact that there was far more going on, and they were far more along in this investigation and had more evidence than we were aware of. And I was actually impressed when I read that first affidavit after his arrest and we started to get some information on the investigation. I was actually impressed with the amount of work that they had done and how involved the FBI was. They just weren't telling us. Fine. You know, I don't expect that of them. I don't know if that's the same case here. I don't think that we're like, oh, they're farther along than we think, and they've got much more to work on than we know of. I think we know exactly what they've got, and it's not much.
Yeah, and I was actually I had a little glimmer of hope when the federal prosecutor showed up to take a tour of the house like 2 weeks ago. Because we're like this close from a federal takeover if they can prove that she's gone or maybe cross state lines or international lines, right? I mean, there are federal nexuses that can kick in. And like myself at this point, I'd like to see a complete FBI takeover in a case. But a lot of people don't understand that. It's not television where they come in and say, all right, we're in charge. You know, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but you know, too, if the feds want to find a way to take over a case, they're going to find a way to take over.
Oh, they're always lurking.
And I think they could easily find an excuse to do it here. The problem is, I wonder if they want to.
It's so screwed up.
I wonder if nobody wants to be associated with this thing at this point. Like everybody wants to be the hero. Nobody wants to be the heel. And it's like, they're probably saying, you know what, Pima County, it's all you. You own it.
It's the cleanup crew in this one. You got to clean up a big mess, you know, unless
again, thank you.
Unless the pizza guy was intentional.
Oh my God, the pizza guy, the deliveries, the pool guy, the landscaping. I mean, you name it. And this could have all been avoided, parking that THV right in the front lawn. Nobody comes on the property, period, end of point. And I hope that future places who have a crime like this learn from this, because I can't take it anymore. I can't.
Joe pulled all his hair out.
Yeah. I look like Bon Jovi before this case started.
And I was 6'3".
No, it's absolutely crazy. So yeah, we're almost at 1,200 viewers. We'll be tightening this up a little bit. Josh Ritter, last thoughts on both cases. How do you think this week goes for Rex Heuermann, and what do you think the next steps are in the Nancy Guthrie case?
Well, it's interesting. You look at Rex Heuermann and you look at a case that went unsolved for such a long time, and there was a lot of investigatory missteps to begin to start it off, but then they turned it around. And I am hopeful the same thing can be applied to Nancy Guthrie. I'm hopeful it's not going to take a decade, but I am also optimistic that in this day and age, with the amount of evidence that they do have, remember, we constantly are name checking Kohberger when it comes to Nancy Guthrie, but remember a couple of things. One, that wasn't solved for 47 days. We're not to that point yet with Nancy Guthrie. We're getting close, but we're not to that point yet. And two, they had less to work on in the Kohberger case than I think they have in the Guthrie case right now. In Kohberger, you remember, they had a vague description of a vehicle that they thought was connected to the crime. And they didn't even have the year right, and they had trouble identifying the make and model. In Guthrie, you've got the person on tape. And I realize they've got their wearing a mask, but there is so much information out of that. And I just can't imagine that with that amount of information, with all of the resources that are dedicated to this, that they're just going to end up with zilch. So I'm hopeful that we're gonna get a conclusion to this. I'm just hopeful that it happens in a quicker timeline than we did in Rex Heuermann.
Josh Zeman, you can have the final word here.
Listen, we're just gonna have to go see. I mean, there's so many things we didn't even bring up that I think defense and I think Josh would have a field day with. For example, a police chief and a district attorney arguing about the number of serial killers leaving bodies on Gilgo Beach, publicly having an argument, what that would do for a defense attorney. I mean, that would be ridiculous. So we're just going to have to see Nancy. It's a tragedy. It's a real tragedy. It's exciting that Josh says that he thinks we can turn it around. I hope so.
Yep, me too. And hopefully they find Nancy in good condition and they bring her home. If you haven't followed Courtroom Confidential, please make sure you go over there and follow. Same thing with Sinister and Josh Zeman and Victoria. Last second in there with the super. Thank you very much. Love from British Columbia. Love your content. Folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in. We had over 1,200 people watching this live. Very impressive. We're approaching new records for me, so this is kind of exciting. But Josh Ritter, thank you very much. Josh Zeman, thank you very much. You guys hang out 1 second. We're going to say goodbye to everybody. Take care, folks. We'll see you next week.